I'm excited to introduce to you today's speaker. She brings a unique perspective to our discussion. Dr. Claire Meek is a clinical consultant in diabetes and pregnancy at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, UK, and a principal investigator at the Institute of Metabolic Science, University of Cambridge. She's supported by a Diabetes UK Intermediate Clinical Fellowship and Future Leaders Award from the European Foundation for the Study of Diabetes in association with the Novo Nordisk Foundation. Dr. Meek's research interests include diabetes, nutrition, and obesity in pregnancy. We're excited to have Dr. Meek with us today. So let's get started. Thank you, Dr. Meek.
Thank you very much, Denise, for that introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here today and also to see people here from around the world as well as all around the United States. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak. We're going to talk today, myself and also Professor Corcoy, about a project we've done recently, novel biochemical markers of glycemia, predicting pregnancy outcomes in women with type 1 diabetes. And this was a part of the CONCEPT randomized control trial. And CONCEPT itself was sponsored by the JDRF, but the current analysis was also very much supported by the EFSD. So thank you very much to our funders and also to Diabetes UK who fund me personally. So we know, all of us who are involved in day-to-day pregnancy care, that assessing glycemic control in pregnancy is vital. And yet, of course, there are many challenges. We know that HbA1c is known to have limitations, although it's obviously still very widely used. And our hope was, coming out of the CONCEPT study, that continuous glucose monitoring may offer new opportunities for us to predict pregnancies at high risk of adverse outcomes, that we might be able to intervene meaningfully at an early stage. And so the aim of the current study was to compare the ability of biochemical markers and continuous glucose monitoring metrics to predict outcomes in pregnancies affected by type 1 diabetes. And I'm going to concentrate today on 4 major outcomes of interest: preterm birth, large for gestational age, which was centile over 90% based on customized centiles or Gros criteria. Neonatal hypoglycemia, defined as, according to 3.5 millivolts per litre. I'm just trying to remember, I think that's 63 milligrams per deciliter. And also neonatal intensive care unit admission, which was for at least 24 hours. We're going to talk through, first of all, if this is a sort of a race, if you like, to find the best marker to predict outcomes in type 1 diabetes pregnancy, then who are the contenders for this? And so if we look at the contenders, first of all, looking at HbA1c, HbA1c is, of course, the standard of care. It reflects glycemia over around about 2 to 3 months, but it is very much affected by iron deficiency anemia, gestational age, ethnicity. Of course, there are some ethnic groups who have particular hemoglobin variants that impact upon the reliability of HbA1c. And so there has been concern over many years that actually HbA1c may not be that reliable in pregnancy. There have, however, been a number of new biochemical markers available, and one is called 1,5-anhydroglucitol. Now, this is thought to be a naturally occurring monosaccharide, reflecting glycemia over around 2 weeks. And this monosaccharide competes with glucose uptake in the tubule of the kidney. And so whenever glycemia is high, 1,5-anhydroglucitol levels are low. We also have had a range of new developments really within the glycated protein space. Fructosamine is a very old marker, total glycated serum proteins, but over the last number of years, glycated albumin, a more specific marker, has been available as well. And these are thought to reflect glycemia over 2 weeks. Now, there's some benefits, at least theoretically, to using glycated proteins rather than glycated hemoglobin, and they're less likely to be influenced, for example, by iron deficiency anemia and so forth. And then the 4th biochemical marker that we're going to look at is called GCD59, and this is a glycated complement protein 59. And the complement protein itself prevents cell lysis following activation of complement, and glycation of that protein slows its action. And this is thought to reflect glycemia over around 2 weeks. So then thinking through the CGM metrics for this study, so you can see that we used many of the standard metrics that you'll be very familiar with: mean CGM glucose, time in range, time above range, time below range, coefficient variation, and standard deviation of blood glucose. We used the standard pregnancy range as recommended, 63 to 140 milligrams per deciliter. So if we think about this as a race, then which marker is the winner? So I'm going to start off by showing a range of graphs like this, really taking each marker in turn. And these graphs show the standardized odds ratio. So that's the odds ratio for one standard deviation increase in the marker here, 1,5 anhydroglycitol. And you can see I have shown data here from 12 weeks, 24 weeks, and 34 weeks for each of those 4 outcomes we discussed earlier. So preterm birth, large for gestational age, neonatal hypoglycemia, and NICU admission or admission to the neonatal intensive care unit. And you can see here that 1,5 anhydroglycitol shows a number of significant findings. But nothing very significant, but there are a few things picked up really from 12 weeks. But if we compare this to other markers, do we find any benefit? Well, first of all, fructosamine, a very old marker, and certainly there are some borderline significant changes here you can see with very wide confidence intervals. Those are the error bars there showing 95% confidence intervals. So fructosamine overall, perhaps a little disappointing. Can we improve upon that with glycated albumin, the new kid on the block? Well, the short answer is no. Unfortunately, glycated albumin didn't really improve the predictive ability here, and in fact was really quite sporadic in terms of predicting those important outcomes. So what about moving on then to our other measures, GCD59 and HbA1c? And here's where the story changes, I think, a bit. So both GCD59 and HbA1c are able to identify multiple outcomes and across those 3 time periods. So taking GCD59 first, you can see that actually it really stars at 24 weeks, where it's a really strong predictor of neonatal hypoglycemia and also NICU admission. And you can see that actually compared to all the other biochemical markers, it was the strongest single indicator of neonatal hypoglycemia and NICU admission in this study at 24 weeks. However, HbA1c is really also able to give a very good performance here, both at 24 weeks and at 34 weeks, able to identify numerous outcomes of interest. And I think in some ways that's surprising, but also very encouraging to support the clinical care really around the world that relies on HbA1c. So moving on then to CGM metrics, can we discuss which one would be best? Well, here is the mean CGM glucose, again, same sort of graph really, and you can see that the mean glucose performs pretty well at 24 weeks and a bit really at 34 weeks, but time above range does perhaps a slightly better job at 34 weeks, so able to identify multiple outcomes of interest, both at 24 and 34 weeks. And what about time in range then? How does that compare? Well, you can see that actually of these 3 metrics, the time in range actually performs excellently at 12 weeks. So able to identify, even in early pregnancy, 4 outcomes of interest. And you can see that actually all the way through, it's just a really solid predictor of multiple outcomes. So can we improve upon this with anything else? Well, no, time below range had no significant associations, and actually coefficient variation, no significant associations. And standard deviation of blood glucose is very much related to the mean blood glucose, but once you adjust for that, it has no significant independent associations here with variability alone once you take the concentration into account. So where does that then leave us? Who then is the winner, if you like? So would we choose CGM or would we choose HbA1c if we had only one choice to make? And I think really here you can see them side by side. Time in range, the best CGM marker, and HbA1c, certainly one of the best biochemical markers. And I think it's clear that time in range is more predictive at 12 weeks, but actually HbA1c is probably more predictive at 34 weeks. And so when we use these together, I think this is very encouraging that we can good pregnancy risk assessment really all the way through. So in the clinic, what would happen if we had no HbA1c? Well, you can see that actually the time in range and the time above range together also provide very good coverage. So the time in range better at 12 weeks, the time above range better at 34 weeks, but overall very consistent. And then what about if we have no CGM, as of course happens in many places internationally still in type 1 diabetes? Well, we can see that actually HbA1c is providing excellent predictive ability at 24 and 34 weeks, really encouraging ability to pick up multiple markers of interest, multiple outcomes of interest. So then thinking through our conclusions, I think we can conclude that time in range and HbA1c both offer very good predictive ability for multiple outcomes of interest. And the best CGM predictors were time in range, time above range, and mean CGM glucose. Probably the best single one was time in range. Time in range can predict preterm birth, large for gestational age, neonatal hypoglycemia, and NICU admission from 12 weeks. But HbA1c also performed very strongly at 24 and 34 weeks. And we also had the novel marker GCD59, was a very strong neonatal outcome marker when measured at 24 weeks. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to the women with type 1 diabetes who took part in the concept trial, also our concept collaborators, including Denise and Rosa here with us today, and the rest of the study team. Thank you very much. This paper was published recently. I'd just like to draw your attention to it in Diabetes Care, and I'd like to thank my other co-authors who aren't here today. And please do get in touch with us if you have any questions. Thank you very much.